I would like to introduce our second speaker, a design entrepreneur, architect, computational designer and educator, architect Sushant Verma. Currently leading Lab Studio, research in architecture and technology that investigate intersections of design, art and technology through architecture, interior design and art installations. Master's degree in Emerging Technologies and Design from Architectural Association London. Former architect at Zaha Hadid Architects London. Senior editor at ARC20. Since the inception of Brand Lab, which was co-founded in 2012 in London, architect Sushant Verma, collectively with his organization Brand Lab, has so far organized 40 plus educational workshops, given 28 public talks, lectures, received 9 accolades, awards, exhibited on 22 occasions, published 6 research papers, and has had about 60 media impressions in print and digital. Recipient of Max Schindler Award from Vienna, Los Angeles, and a finalist for AIA Emerging Leaders Fellowship from Chicago. He has delivered a talk at TEDx Gurgaon on smart cities need smarter design education. Please put your hands together for architect Sushant Verma. So we welcome you to the stage.
Thank you very much for warm welcome. Thank you, Sindhake and Sadiq and the team as well for giving me the opportunity to come here and speak in front of all of you guys. And so it's truly a privilege and an honor to come here and talk about technology and architecture. Firstly, congratulations to all the students for putting together such a wonderful exhibition of works in the last few days, and congratulations to the team for guiding all of you to be able to reach this extent. So I truly believe in independent education, and I think this is a fine example of an independent education module which really started a series of change, and hopefully you guys will take it forward from here on as well. So firstly and foremost, this is the title of my talk, Future of Design Tools of the Past, and this is exactly how I feel right now whenever I use any kind of tools. Now there's a reason I'm calling this the future of design and the tools of the past, and you might think, what are the tools of the past? Are we really using the tools of the past right now, or are we really delving into the tools of the future? So let's look into that. Let's look at the kind of tools and how fast we are as designers to change, to drive innovation and change our culture. Now first and foremost, I'd like to set the context as to define and redefine technology, I would say. So the basic definition of technology is actually all about techniques of doing something, or the methodology of doing something. Technology is not purely about software or tools or computers or machines rather, right? So a technique or methodology to do something, to carry out a task. If I'm an architect, I'm a designer. So the process of doing something is my technology. And that is what I want you to believe as the first thing, that technology is not only about computers. If you're bad at computers, you're not really picking up, don't worry, you have your own technology to reinvent. You have to create your own tools and methods. Now, and giving you an example, a very fine example from the other discipline. It's far away. Right. The other discipline is how many of you use this app? Can I have a show of hands? 10%, 20, 80, 90, 100. Perfect. Right. So all of us are using this app, right? We're using Uber, we're using Ola, and lots of various kind of applications. What has Uber done in the last? I don't know. How old is Uber? Does anyone have any idea? 50 years, 10 years, 5 years? It's a 10 years old company. It was founded in 2009. Right? It's just a decade old, and it has permeated into our culture. It has changed the culture in a very large way. It has changed the way how we behave in our society. So technology is embedded. So why as designers, why as architects, we really shy away from using technologies or techniques? Why are we resistant to use new techniques of doing something? Why do we want to stick to how things have been done in the past? And that is something that I would like each of you to question yourself. Just before the talk, I had a couple of students come to me and ask me, how do we think of these kind of shapes? How do we, design something like this? We always end up in a box. So yeah, you have to think out of the box, and for that you have to reinvent the way you think of design. Now, when I say tools of the past, these are the tools I'm talking about. And you might wonder, why are these the tools of the past? They sound very futuristic, and they are indeed, I would say. So things like algorithmic design, generative design, evolutionary design, parametric design. This is pretty much the language that we talk in our work in our studio, to be honest. And this all comes under the larger umbrella of computational design, which is where we're talking about technology in general, in architecture or design. Now, is this the new tool? Are these the tools of the future, or are these the tools of the past? Well, this was all started in 1988, right? Very surprising. I think a little before than most of you were born. The guys at the back or at the front. So this is when the whole idea of algorithmic design or thinking or generative design actually started. So more than 3 decades. Has it been able to bring in a larger effect? It is starting to do now, but why has it not happened before? Why have we been so resistant to understand? This is a book from late 80s, Algorithmic Design and Architecture. Now, talking about innovation and why are we slow and why are we lagging behind in innovating? There was a communication expert called Everett Rogers who defined this bell curve, which talks about the diffusion of innovation. Now, when I say talk about diffusion of innovation, any technology that starts that is initially adopted by only a few set of people. For example, if I started Uber, for example, only a few percentage of people will start to use that. Once it kind of filters through them and they find it successful or worthy, it goes on to the next set of people. And that is how every single technology, every single invention or innovation, I would say, goes through a series of curves, which pretty much starts from the first 2.5%, which we call as innovators, who are the ones who are starting to use that. And then we have the early adopters, which is the next 13.5%. And then we have the early majority. There is a little chasm in between, which is where most of the technologies die. 95% of technologies or new inventions are not able to cross that hurdle. This is where technologies which really go beyond that, they become more successful and get more adopted. I don't really say successful or failed, they get more adopted by people. Now, and in the next 34 is the early majority, and then there's a late majority, 24%, and then we have the last 16% of laggards. Right, so that is how any innovation comes and permeates into our culture. When we talk about, look at this curve again in a redefined way, and let's map various kind of technologies. How many iPhone users are there? How many Androids? So definitely have more Android crowd here. This is where you guys stand. So this is where Android technology stands right now, just at the early adopters. Sorry, iPhone is slightly different. I'm not advocating Apple versus Android here. But a technology like Gmail, for example, this is where it stands right now in terms of adoption. This is my favorite compact disc series. Again, not many of you would have used compact discs because it's age and date of pen drives. But yeah, I'm a little older than what I look like. So yeah, I have used compact discs and floppy drives and used them that excessively before the pen drives became popular. And the technologies that have permeated till the 100% across all the 5 zones is television and newspaper. And now you can have a comparative between what is innovation. Right? What is happening in architecture though? We'll come back to this famous Rogers curve and try to see where we lie in terms of innovation and technology. But what I quite find very interesting is that the laggards would actually end up using the technology which innovators are using, and this is where we are trying to bridge the gap and change the culture in a way. And it's kind of fascinating that technologies like virtual reality, for example, is being used by a 90-year-old woman here. Or this is a very inspiring photograph that I find that an auto rickshaw driver has access to smartphones and the various technologies associated with the smartphone, because he has to function and operate, because that's how the society has changed. You You find it easier to call an auto rickshaw or a cab through a smartphone. So we have managed to change that. Technology has managed to change the culture in one way or the other. But where do we stand in architecture? This is what I would question. Now in the same sense, this is where I would start to define what I do. So I'm an architect and design technologist, and how I would define design technologist is give a very interesting example from Simon Sinek's talk. I don't know how many of you know this guy. A very inspiring entrepreneur who really talks about how innovators think. And he talks about this one example that he gives. Sorry, I know there are not many Apple fans here. But again, he gives this example of Apple, Steve Jobs, and how Apple markets. Now, most of the innovators, they would think outside in. They would first talk about what they do, and then they talk about how they do it, and then they would, at last, some of them will talk about why they do what they do. Now, for example, in Apple, and he gives this example in one of his TEDx talks, that if Apple was to market its products in the reverse way, how they don't do, they would do it start from the what. So they would pretty much say that okay, we make good computers or good looking computers, and how we do it, we try to innovate and design and the best of the state of the art technologies. And then why we do it? Yeah, because we want to change the world. Now I don't think there would be many buyers of this marketing campaign, I would say. However, they do it exactly the opposite way, and that is the single most common thing between every innovator, how they present their idea. They would first talk about the why, and this is exactly how Apple markets as well. We want to change the world. How we design the cutting edge technology which anybody can use. What? We design computers, we make computers. Want to buy one? And that's exactly how it gets more impactful, because that's pretty much how innovation has to be carried forward. Reversing the order of what, why, and how, I would like to start from the why of what we do, and why we do what we do basically right now. So initially, how architects have been operating. Architecture has always been, and design in general has always been, direct dependent on the tools and techniques available at that time. And I can give you a very simple example for that. When the set squares were not invented to measure the angles, every building that was there, or every design that was done, it was done orthogonal. All the buildings were orthogonal because we had access to a parallel bar or T-square. Right after the invention of set square, we could measure angles accurately, so we could construct with angles. So we started to use that, and a lot of buildings started to have angles and wedges, and that's how a different dimension started to come across. Later on, when computers started to come, which is where we have been in the last 20-30 years, I would say, when computers really took over, we started to use that, and we could have a higher accuracy of designing buildings. So the buildings started to change form and change shape. What's happening now is we have techniques, tools and methodologies available to us which can help us to compute things, which we call as computational design or parametric design, as we typically and commonly know and associate with. Using these techniques, we are able to design differently, and the outcomes are slightly more different. So obviously there has always been a direct relationship between the tools. It is about how early can we as designers are able to learn those kind of tools. As Professor Kuti also mentioned initially, that technology is moving really fast, and we have to really catch up with the pace of technology. And this is an actual problem right now. And it is actually about how fast you are able to adapt to that, and how quickly you are able to learn and grasp those kind of techniques, I would say. And where we are headed in terms of future is, of course, access to virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and various kind of things. And of course, artificial intelligence, robotics, and whatnot. So many things are happening right now in terms of technology. So of course, this has a larger impact of. I really don't think that robots will take over our jobs, or computers can think. To be honest, artificial intelligence is also programmed by human beings. So you have to understand that first thing, that
It is not the computer designing for you ever, or it is not a tool or a software which is going to give you an answer. It is you who have to understand what the software does, how does it do what it does, and then start to answer your questions. Even a structural designer would not just run through an analysis on a software and tell you if the structure is going to work or not. He will also do mathematical calculations to compute a structure. So there is always a computation happening digitally and physically as well. Now, but when it comes to technology in architecture, this is, as I mentioned, this is the state of my mind right now. And I recently wrote this article for a magazine who invited me to guest edit, make a cover story. And quite interestingly, this was the title, if you can read. Why architects hate technology. And I was dead serious about this. It was more of a satirical outcome to the article. But again, I was dead serious about this. Most of the architects I know, they hate technology. And I'll tell you why. It intimidates you. And that is the reason. It does intimidate you. It does intimidate you because it's moving really fast. It's moving really quick. The time that I will require to understand the new technologies may be a few years. And I would need to practice that. By the time I learn that, there are 5 more technologies out there. How do you cope up with that situation? So the best is to adapt to everything and get exposed to a lot of things. And then it's let your mind take a particular direction and you become an expert or something. So I think that became very interesting dialogue with a lot of fellow architects as well. It did invite a lot of Instagram spamming, which happened thereafter. However, so this is pretty much what I do. So I run this organization called RATLab. Although we still get a lot of phone calls and applications from scientists and biologists and diagnostic lab guys who want to work with us. So we tell them, hey, we are an architecture studio. We don't operate in rats or other kind of animals. However, there's a software called Grasshopper which we typically use, and Rhino which we typically use. All pretty much sounds like a zoo of animals. But again, if you read it properly, which is what a lot of people miss out, so RAD stands for Research in Architecture and Technology. And this is exactly how we started the organization. This is back in 2012. We were kind of completing a master's at the AA, studying MTech, Emerging Technologies and Design. So me and my partner Pradeep, we were just discussing about, we were quite frustrated at that time. I mean, with the way we saw the world and how we were seeing things. And we thought, we have technologies out there, but we designers are really not using it. And so how do we bridge the gap between design and technology? And there is no sense of research, there is no sense of understanding. People are making crazy buildings. I was really surprised to see, last year I was in Dubai, and this is irrespective of this one. But last year I was in Dubai and I went to Burj Khalifa, and I saw and I really admire, SOM's work. And it's a beautiful piece of architecture, the tallest buildings, and a lot of engineering went into that. But when I saw the concept diagrams of that, I saw this flower and how the concept revolves around the 3 petals of the flowers and how they took it forward. And that kind of disappointed me quite a lot, that is this how architects are working? Where is the research happening? Where are we really understanding? And look at scientists, they understood how leaves store energy and use it for future. And we invented solar panels or solar cells, right? Gladly it doesn't look like the shape of the leaf. But by no offense to people from Hyderabad, what architects do is make fish-shaped buildings. I'm sure people have seen that. There's a fish-shaped building in Hyderabad, very interesting. You go from the airport, you can observe that. And I always manage to take picture of that because it always excites me that what did we do here? Is this our inspiration from nature? So where is the research happening? So anyway, back to 2012 London, where we were starting to formulate this group. So our primary reason was just one. So this is our why, of why we do what we do since then, since the last 7 years now, I would say. And it has taken its own forms and shapes as well. Just to bridge the gap between design and technology. So we do that in a number of ways. So how we do it, we try to integrate and take inspiration from various things. So we really find that between the intersections of design and technology, there is somewhere a role of nature as well. So typically we operate at the intersections of design, technology and nature, I would say. And yes, there is some kind of association between design and nature. This is another excerpt I wrote for a piece, for a book I was writing, which is that we as human beings have a tendency to chase nature or natural systems using our limited conscious knowledge and unlimited subconscious being. Now, there's a deep meaning to this thing that, like we always find beauty in nature. We will always find beauty in patterns of nature. And we try to take inspirations from that. Now, there are two reasons why we find nature as beautiful. And of course, I think most of us know that there is a sense of mathematics in nature, in every geometry. Of course, most of us, our minds do not have the right capability to understand that. I can't look at a flower and understand that it's rotating at a particular angle. I really don't have the capabilities to do that. Maybe some of you may have that intellect to look into something and observe that. But yeah, I mean, there is a sense of beauty that we find in nature. That is because we have limited understanding of nature. We're still exploring nature and how it really functions. And unlimited subconscious knowledge because we are all a part of the nature. So we have a sense of association with that. And that's a fractal geometry, by the way. I'm sure that Veer has given you good insight to that, more elaboratively in the last few days. But yeah, there are hidden algorithms in nature. You can really break down these patterns and then like decode them. You can see the Fibonacci spiral in the typical Nautilus shell. The good part that I quite find very interesting is that there is a sense of scalability in nature. You can find the same pattern on a small scale shell, and at the Kochi beach there are a lot of vendors selling these kind of shells as well. I was really intrigued to go this afternoon and find one for myself to put in my space. And yeah, you can observe that at such a larger scale as well. So what does nature teach us here? For example, this is a Voronoi mathematical pattern. It's a space division system, and you can find that on the wings of a dragonfly, on the veins of a leaf, or the shell of a tortoise. This is all about scalability. So this is exactly what we try to understand, that there is a sense of scalability in nature, and this is what we try to inculcate. So how we do it? We try to create various sets of computational tools. We use computation to its best of its potentials based on our capabilities and understanding. And we try to make a lot of technologies, I would say, or micro technologies within our studio with a team of experts who are spread globally and not just in India, and try to integrate them in various kind of designs. For example, we built in environmental analysis which are integrated in a system that while we are designing certain buildings, we are able to understand the energy analysis at the same time. And these are like very simple to make tools if you have a basic understanding of computation, to be honest. Tools like visibility analysis, where we are understanding the visibility of a particular building here based on how much you see on a particular area. And using these kind of tools and methodologies, you are able to predict much more better how your buildings and spaces are going to perform. This is like a 360-degree cone vision of a person moving inside a space, which is helping us understand a lot of urban morphologies and a lot of urban projects which we are working on. This was a project close to Shimla which we did a few years back, where we designed, we worked with a team of experts who had their own sense of expertise, and we were doing this rainwater analysis. So how it works is, these are like raindrops falling on a highly contoured site, and computationally speaking and geometrically speaking, let's say, you may be able to relate to that since you are design students. It's about finding every single point, the XYZ coordinates of every point. You find all the neighboring points, find the Z value of the neighboring point, and define the slope accordingly, and that's how the water is going to flow. So it's a simple understanding of a concept and applying that to create a tool which can help us understand drainage system at large at an urban site. Tools often go on to extend to this as well, where we are designing and this is from various kind of workshops that we conduct, and this is from our studios. This is our student work. We were designing these skyscrapers, and so I came back from Bangalore. I was running this workshop called Parametric Skyscrapers in Bangalore, and this is what we were doing there, pretty much trying to design various typologies and morphologies of high-rise structures, and using a mathematical curve how we can affect the form just by altering the rotation of a floor plate and the scaling of a floor plate. So two very simple geometrical articulations but integrated into a system where we are able to control that using a sine curve or a Bezier curve or various kind of mathematical curve data that we are using. So this is the integration of technology into architecture, I would say. I also run a 6-month program on computational design, which is a combination of studio and online sessions which we do. We have students from all across India and now even outside of India as well. And this is a demonstrative work from last batch students. So this is my students' work who developed a system where we used a leap motion device which could track the human hand and integrate that information into your typical computational setup and use that to affect the curvature of a surface. Now this is just the starting point, I would say. This is not the end product, but this is starting to a new interface that one can develop. And this is a team of architects, a team of interactive artists who's kind of working together. And now we are kind of developing the system with the next set of students. And we may possibly end up developing a toolkit or a software maybe in the next 2 or 5 years, which makes it more intuitive to design in an environment where we didn't have access to otherwise. So I think this becomes like the next leg of things. Now talking about what we do, now coming to the last part of this. So we do take into account scalability, which is something that I mentioned that we really kind of inspire from nature. And we're working on various kind of projects. Of course, there's a lot of intent in these projects that goes through, so I won't get into depths of each and every project, but I'll try to really show you various scales of project which we're working on. So of course, we're working on small scale, medium, large, extra large, and various plethora of works that we have been doing in a studio. And we are doing a lot of collaborative work with working with other architects and designers, and helping them by using design technologies and integrating that, as well as independent projects of various scales. So you would see like installations, facades, you would see furniture pieces, urban analysis, structural studies, environmental studies of various kinds, which is kind of spread across various scales. And the backbones of all of this is computational design, which is the technologies that we use. And to be honest, these technologies will be redundant as well, maybe like 5 years, 10 years, or maybe 2 years, we don't know. So that is the pace of technology. But what we try to integrate is, now as an architect and as a designer, I truly believe that it is not only about using a tool, it is about how you articulate that seamlessly into a design. So obviously it is not always technology which is going to drive your results, it is your sensibility as a designer of how you use a particular technology. So there are times when we use very, very simple techniques or computation, so to say, but at the same time the articulation of that is as per the project. For example, these are various small scale products of furniture and multifunctional furniture pieces and installations which we've been doing in the last few years, and trying to build that in a manner which can be built at a very low cost, quick timeline and a very quick workflow. So I think that becomes, and I think for me as a designer, my key lies in how do I really drive these curves and how do I control these curves, because this can really go out of hand as well. When you work with any kind of complex geometry which is really outside the box, it becomes very difficult to control because we don't have the mathematical and computational understanding at times to control this. So that control becomes really important and integral, and we try to do that in various kind of spaces, even at larger scale as well. This is a space we designed very recently in Delhi, where we have this large fluidic wall 20 feet by 8 feet on that direction, and this was kind of put together in a matter of very short span of time, and even the furniture piece that I showed you before this was like really put together in 6 hours or 8 hours, and like 1/5 the cost of an actual furniture piece, I would say. And we've been doing that kind of thing at various scales. So I particularly, also because I work with Zahadi the architect, so I have this inclination of working along with those and trying to control that and articulate that. So obviously that is something that I really owe to the organization because I was associated with them while I was in London. So again, this is another example. This was a collaboration between, this was a project for Shivas and fashion designer Ashish Soni, and we were designing this perfumery to launch a new perfume. So we have this overall idea of sectioning a particular geometry, and like how we can section any geometry, which is a very simple and straightforward technique or a tool that you can do. But the moment you're able to control the geometry, the next part becomes controlling the data. And I think the essence of this project lied in how we detailed this out based on the project brief. So the project brief was quite tight in terms of timelines, costing, and how Tanveer was also mentioning about various kind of constraints of these projects. And this is a typical scenario. We're always working with various kind of constraints. But it is about how we take these constraints and convert them into opportunities. So in this particular case, we devised a system. So this is a 900 kilogram wall, which again we know the weight of this because while we were designing, we could understand the amount of material, the density of material used, the volume, and henceforth we could calculate the weights. So a very simple mathematics, simple algorithms here, which allowed us to compute that. And the challenge was this had to be put on this board, which was again a temporary structure. There is no structural support from the back, and this had to be put together in one night. Because this was for an exhibition, so the space was not available, the site wasn't available, and this was put in I think with Leela at Delhi, and then this was dismantled, went to Taj Lands in Mumbai, and then assembled again within a matter of one night. So this became very challenging. So again, how we detailed it out was really the key. So we made this locking mechanism where like every fin at the back is kind of detailed out in a manner where you were just slotting in every geometry and just placing a board at the end to slot it up and hold it. So without using any screws, without using any pasting material or wet adhesives, we could manage to make a fully stable structure, which was the reason it became like it could be erected was because we computed it and predicted the weight and everything beforehand. And of course, this is what a typical fabrication data of this would look like. So you would see that the detail of that is really worked out here. So of course, I had to be really aware that let's say this cross section that you see has to be the thickness of the board that slots in. This has to be the thickness on which it's going to fall. So every little thing has a tolerance, so you have to take into account all sorts of things and how things work on site and take it forward from there. How we do it, of course, there were a lot of other aspects in this project. So we really made a lot of prototypes and variations. So this was, we kind of sectioned the typical section of Shiva's bottle. And tried to create various articulations of the same, and which was kind of projected on the large scale as well. So again, this is what the space looked like, and every furniture piece and everything was kind of part of that. So this was another project we designed. We were invited for presenting our works at Orleans Cross in 2015, where we were at that time working on a number of projects in. We were working on a facade project at that time about a retrofit of facade. So we thought, why don't we take a part of that facade system and take the same language to build a full structure and demonstrate the potentials of what we can do. So we really used, we had about 5,000 surfaces here, so about 917 hexagons. So all of these are hexagons, so it's a one topology, but different typologies. All 917 hexagons are of different shape and size. How do you manage to put them together? How does it make to form a surface? That is something that we are computing. But as a facade, how it functions is, this is typically what is the most interesting part, that every little face is actually to do with the solar angle and the solar vector, and how it would, like if the solar angle hits a wall like perpendicular, it's going to radiate more heat, it's going to insulate more heat into that facade. If you move it more towards 90 degrees perpendicular to that or tangential to that, it will allow less heat to dissipate inside. So using that principle, we could really understand the climatic data and compute a second skin, which could realign how the energy analysis works. The process, of course, was really interesting. How we could really compute these geometries, break it down. We had to go through a lot of structural tests and analysis, where we actually knew that okay, these are the weak points, where we have to have a lot of support. This was a very challenging project because we had to lift this entire surface without. The constraint was that we can't even put a single nail on the wall, and it had to go to 25 feet, and we did not have any access to that area. So we had to devise a pulley system which we could somehow manage to put together, and I think me and 3 of my team members really had to take a risk of hanging in 15 feet high through a kacha ladder, and manage to put a pulley through which we could pull the entire surface to make this a seamless surface. But when we have to pull this surface seamlessly, we have to make sure that the structure of it would not fail. So we had to know that where exactly and this is pretty much where the pulley was, so where all do the springs of the pulley will start to join. And we have to know the length of every string, and this is how the elements were unfolded, laser cut, put together. So a lot of tedious yet interesting exercise, and that's pretty much how the fabrication data is organized. And of course every panel had a numbering system in place, so we knew that this number would go with this, pretty much like the logics that you were trying to build in your workshops as well, how one item goes with the other, and using simple rules. So me and my team of experts who were not really experts at that time could actually understand and really build it together. And of course we had challenge of how to transport this on the site. At an exhibition, you always have this challenge that you're working again on lower budgets. We didn't have any commissions for this, so we had to pretty much self-fund the project. But the idea was that it had to be transported onto the site. It had to be, and this was pretty much the initial phases of when I had just moved back to India to set up the studio here. So obviously we were very, very low on the budget, so we all really saved down on the transportation cost and everything as well. So what we ended up doing was, we divided this into smaller parts which could fit in the car, and transported on the site, and then they are put together. And again, merging these joints became a challenge as well. Where computation plays a very key role is how we were putting it together is, of course, as you can see these kind of springs coming in. So length of every spring is actually computed as a data information that we are getting through our tool or software, I would say. I hate to use the word software because software makes us think that it's a magic machine or a magic button which gives you a result, which is not how architecture should be treated like. I don't think anything should be seen as a software. So this is our tool of Grasshopper which we use, and so which is where we know based on the structural analysis which are the elements which require multiple strings so it doesn't fall or doesn't tear apart, because this was a thick sheet of paper. So again, we managed to. This is how the whole structure was kind of put together, which was a very interesting experience in general, and this was pretty much the outcome. And I think it was a 20-25 day exhibition, and it did manage to stay. And this entire thing is just hooked up on a single clamp on the top, and everything else is loaded through a fishnet string, which has a lot of strength, but it's a very thin one. So, and we have to double the structure. This is another project where, and I'm trying to show you various kind of projects where we try to deploy computation or try to innovate in our own different ways as well. Where we had a very interesting brief of the project that it was a stone experience center for a stone showroom who had this expertise of using stone, and the only brief was that it has to be cutting edge in terms of something like that should have not been done before in India in stone. So how do you innovate in stone? So we really did a lot of R&D in that, and we were really inspired by the crystallization of stones. So what we really started to carry forward was how we can actually subdivide a geometry recursively to give various iterations. So if you have a sphere and you subdivide that into smaller triangles, and you can keep doing that, this is called recursive subdivision. So every iteration will give you smaller triangles, smaller facets. So this was the idea that we kind of explored, and what we eventually did was, and if you notice here, this is white marble which is kind of permeating light, This is a typical white marble which we lay on the floor. So how we innovated was using a white marble, we CNC mill a stone into ridges and valleys where every triangle had a simple rule of subdivision that you find a center point, join it with the vertices, you get 3 triangles, you find the centroids again, and you join it again, you get 9 triangles, and then you get 81 triangles. So a fractal coming in place in this way. So then this is what we call as recursive subdivision, and we keep doing that till my smallest valley size is the same size as the tooling kit which I have to use for CNC milling. So this is what we try to call it as localization of technology, or a blend of high tech and low tech together, where we really understand the machinery and do it as a back and forth process of being innovative in design. So this is what we ended up with as a conference space, and this was a very low cost project. Doesn't look like with the looks of it, but yeah, this is all because we could manage to optimize the workflow, materiality, and build it in a very simple manner. And it was, for us, it was more of re-envisioning stone and light together and giving an effect of an onyx. So this is how the CNC milling was performed, and that's the output that you see of the CNC milled stone. And this is how it kind of permeates light, and it had this fantastic effect in terms of the overall visual of the space as well. And yeah, this is what I hate to do the before-after comparisons. It makes me look like a salesman. But yeah, that's not how I'd like to do. But this one I really wanted to put it together. But yeah, this is what the space was, and this was what the re-envisioned space was. And there is a stark difference that you would see in the experience center, and really change the way the brand worked, really change the way the brand experience is working now. So they are selling stones here as modern sculptures, and now they are doing all of this. This is what we believed as a designer. We played a huge role in reinventing a 30 or 40-year-old company or what they were doing, just by having a design intervention in place. And yeah, this is what pretty much the space looks like. And yeah, these are not 2 photographs. So this is a photograph taken from the glass in between. So that's a stark difference that you see. So it's an experience center, so we're creating a variation of a different space altogether. This is again a photograph from the other side of the glass. So we find this imagery really interesting, where we have a contrasting image in a single frame. And of course, the construction strategy and everything, I won't go too much in details. We had to really break down the system into a very simple manner, and we followed a typical point coordinate system, where the only thing that the carpenter on the site had to do was to find every single point, and we had a flow chart which kind of defined the x, y, and the z value of every point, and just by demarcating that value at every point, could build the system on the side, make a framework on the side. So you don't really need the drawings, you just need information to build this, and you could actually construct this without using any actual drawings. So there is no scope of inaccuracy because you are actually building on the site. So such a complex design, but we were able to translate that in a much simpler manner. And that is a very simple methodology that is followed on a lot of scales of construction as well. And at the end, the punctures that you see, this is where the marble had to fit in. So since we made an algorithm of subdivision, we could then just cross-check the sizes of all 19 marbles. And pretty much I would say, now using our algorithm at the click of a button, we could compute the fabrication data within a matter of few hours and CNC mill the 19 large slabs of stone to exactly fit into this space without any errors. So I think this is where kind of innovation lies, and this is where we find it interesting. This is another restaurant where we like to really explore the triangulated and faceted form because of the purity of mathematics of this thing. And this is another restaurant which we recently opened in Delhi. And again, which also have this faceted nature. The reason I put this project is not because of design only, because this is a very interesting story to it. Now, whenever we design restaurants, typically, we have a lot of constraints in terms of timelines, because most of the time it's a rented space. So you have a little rental free period, and after which the client will be starting to pay rent, and so they need the space in a very quick span of time. The second challenge we typically face is the budget, which is pretty much across, not just in India but across the globe, I would say. The third challenge is that they would usually have their own set of contractors and team. So we really can't train a person to understand a complex geometry or something which is slightly unconventional to understand, and like you would waste time. So we typically trained the team that the restaurateur had, who were very used to building very simple systems otherwise, to build something like this at the similar cost. So I think this is where like we find the output as more interesting, that we innovated in some way or the other. Since I'm talking of scalability, we work on smaller scales as well. We build in like light systems, chandeliers for various projects in collaborations as well. So this was a lighting system that we designed. Pretty much sample of this is kind of put in a studio. Very simple geometry, just by changing the angles. But the challenge was, how do we make a detail which allows you to change the angle at particular steps. So we managed to do that with some local fabricator and craftsmanship. So this is where the challenge lies. Scalability also goes on to different domains and creative disciplines as well. So this was a collaboration. We were working with a fashion designer from Greece. This was back in London when we were just at the inception of our studio at that time. Where the whole idea of using computation was to make a weaving pattern of a fabric, which is typically what we have in any fabric, but derive it in a manner which could really control the transparency of the dress. And wherever we want to control the transparency and maximize or minimize that, using that we could create a pattern and later on 3D print the dress. We also again worked on product scale as well. This was a trophy we designed for an awards. It's a Women in Architectural Design Awards. So we designed the Wake trophy, which was, they started with a small competition, it was a 2-stage competition. We got shortlisted, we kind of worked with their team to understand, and the whole idea here was to just redefine womanhood, because this was all about celebrating women designers. So for us it was more about how can we in a very simple and cost effective manner design an object which truly represents celebration and womanhood. So we really kind of took a direct inspiration from the logo of W and the first alphabet of women, and kind of lofted a section of that and seamlessly created this pattern and worked with a fabricator who could cast this into iron to make a really low cost trophy as well. I should not say low cost because I think a lot of women amongst you should be hopefully will be winning this award in the next few years, I would say, and that's like a signature style which has become the award. But yeah, it held a really high value for them, and the response that we got from a lot of senior women designers looking at the trophy as well. So that was our contribution to Women Awards. On a larger scale, this is a shopping center which we're working on in Tokyo. On the right hand side, the smaller screen, there you can see a little video of how we actually build the physical simulation to drive the overall form. So it's a dual nature structure which is tensile at a large scale, but a digrade structure at a localized level. So it was an integration of two kind of structural systems, and we had to go through a lot of environmental studies and stuff as well. So typically this is what the second scheme looks like, and this is by a Japanese architect and who got us on board to design the overall building scheme. So we were really overwhelmed when a Japanese company approached us and said, hey, we need your help in technology. So we found it very overwhelming because we associate the Japanese as really high tech. So it was very fortunate for us to be involved in this project. But when it comes to doing the kind of studies and the back end R&D of the project, it really went on to the detailing part of simple mechanism. There are some moving openable systems, there's some energy studies, there's some structural studies that we had to do. So again, not going into depths of all sorts of projects, but yeah, this is an exciting collaboration which hopefully gets built in the next few years. This is another facade which we work with an architect in Delhi. We were typically designing this facade system where every fin is kind of angled out in a certain way. So again, we had to really train a simple fabricator to understand how the frames and all these triangles are going to be fabricated, because it seemed very complex to build on the site. So what we did was we devised a mechanism where these triangles are like flattened on the ground, and again we have the z-axis where we will be pointing, and just by measuring that with a local welder, we could actually make a framework, make every triangle and start to put them together. So there was no requirement of measuring an angle. And while you see that all of these fins are opening up by 2.5 degrees, but without measuring of an angle, we could really build that onto the side. Let me show you a little video of this one. So typically a workflow, we kind of embed the fabrication system and how it's going to be built into the algorithm of the design itself. So while we are designing, we have all sorts of fabrication data, the angles, the length, we know the amount of steel that's going to be required, we know the amount of cladding that's going to be required, and so we can compute the costs right at the time when we are designing. So we don't really work like, okay, hey, design something very complex and then now what? Now how to build it, now how to, it's going to be expensive. So we have to look into these aspects right at the beginning. So this is something that, you as architects or designers should be always doing when you're working on a project, that you have to think of the larger aspects of things as well. Because as an architect, we have not just the role of a designer, but more of a social and cultural role as well. At the same time, we have to understand the site dynamics, how things are going to be built, and I think which becomes, really the key to how things are done. Right, so, but yeah, in terms of the studies and everything, of course, we went through these kind of details. So this is again how, the various panels were built together, and this was, structural studies being done, and all of the fabrication data was simplified to an extent. So, all these things become very critical in terms of how we intervene in design. Everybody is waiting for a dinner and wrapping up the session, so I try to be really quick. Trying to exhaust as many projects as I could just to show you the scalability of things. But moving on, so this is a project which we're working on right now, and it's a facade system where we are trying to have a very complex geometry, but the way we have to build it is slightly complex in the Indian context. So we're trying to, break this geometry down, try to create smaller scale systems to understand and make it understandable to a fabricator. So this is where we are 3D printing a small part and pretty much the most complex part of the facade, and trying to understand at various scales the complexity of the form of the geometry. How can we break down the curvature into simple parts, and how can we take it forward, and then we work with the facade contractors to make them understand that how it is possible to actually build something like this in India if we do it properly. So rather than most of the contractors getting scared right from the visuals that hey, this is going to be expensive, how do we build that? So we have to break it down always. So we do a lot of prototyping and build smaller scale models to demonstrate that. This is another project which we are working on right now, which is again more like a drape effect, pulling down from a building and pulling up to make a porch. So that's like the artistic and the architectural gesture. But the complexity of that, of course, lies at how every fin is different. How can we break this complexity down and actually make it buildable? So, of course, there is some other information on this project which I can't share at this stage. But yeah, how we're breaking this down, the complexity of it. Now, we often think that technology can be limited to only, high-end projects or commercial projects of various kinds. This is a religious and spiritual project which we are working on in South India. This is in Tamil Nadu, a temple which we are working on, is Sai Baba temple. And again, very interestingly, we had to work with sacred geometry and forms. So that became the underlying principle, and this was the one iteration of the concept that we had. And we had a couple of numbers and aspects that we had to consider. So we kind of developed that into a system, more of a folded plate system, and working on various iterations using numbers and sacred geometry and how to make it pure. Now, when we design something, again, that's like the plethora of explorations that we end up doing digitally. First, we do it digitally. Of course, we take it forward to the physical medium as well. But yeah, looking into various kind of complexities and forms and breaking it down, this is pretty much one of the recent iterations. And the flooring structure, and so technology in this case is just helping us to devise a mathematical pattern. How we are articulating that as a flooring, as a structure, as a wall is really up to us as a designer what we do. So it is not really to do with the form or how you would typically associate parametric design as. And again, we look into the radiation studies, how light is going to fall into the space. So while we are designing, we are understanding that like what if the rituals are happening at certain times. If there are 4,000 people inside a hall, what happens to the heat? How do we dissipate heat? So all sorts of building science is involved while we are designing it as well. So we can't limit ourselves only to the artistic part of architecture. We have to look into the scientific part of architecture as well, as architecture is an amalgamation of science and art. So yeah, that's the overall this thing, and it's still being developed. Various iterations are happening. This is a skyscraper we designed collaboration again. This was in Hong Kong. It was a competition project which was won first prize, and it was all about integrating simple examples of sustainability into a simple system which was elegant yet performative. So all those aspects were pretty much involved in a project like this as well. This is a restaurant we recently finished in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. This was again for a brand, it's a chain of restaurant in India, which typically what we were trying to do is we were trying to contextualize every part of it. So in Saudi Arabia, we were trying to really take the inspiration from geometries and how we can kind of integrate geometries in various ways. This is in Mumbai. We designed the Goregaon, where the whole idea was to kind of impart a fluidity and a waviness into the project. And again, you would see various kind of curvilinearity in the project. Again, it had to be, the challenging part was, you can see this curvature, you can see here, you can see another curvature here as well, then there is another curvature being perceived with the cuts. So how do you compute this kind of complexity in a simple integration? Because at the end, we had about 3,000 panels which had to be numbered. But if you start to put these 3,000 elements together onto a false ceiling, you have to realize that there will be different teams working, there will be different contractors. How would you have the sequencing effect? So we really had to make a numbering system and devise a mechanism where everything was, let's say, A1, A2, A3, B1, B2, B and C, the integration, all sorts of things coming in together in place of how to put this together, which made it easier for the fabricator. This was another restaurant we designed in Chandigarh. So again, we were trying to contextualize the overall grid effect and how we can kind of redefine a grid in various articulations as installations, as small gestures as well. So all of that coming together in a fluidic manner and rigid manner. This was in Chandigarh, so we typically took the Corbusian hand and made some art installations. The modular man by the Corbusier again has integrated as simple, cost-effective art installation. So I think it's all about how we integrate all of that into a space. This was a mosque design project which we were doing as a competition. This was in Dubai. Again, we were trying to reimagine the way, looking at various kind of Islamic principles and how we can reorient. As Tanveer was designing in her mosque project as well. It was all about orienting to a particular direction. So we designed this that there's going to be a Qibla wall over here, which is going to be after a series of arches. So it's about how do you get the maximum height defined, which kind of faces towards Mecca. All sorts of principles which were integrated. Of course, I won't get into too much of depth of the project, but again, computation really allowed us to build in this mathematical patterning and articulate that into structure, jalis and various kind of things in a quick span of time. This was our proposal for National War Museum in Delhi, which is, of course, we didn't win the project. It's right now going through controversy as well. But again, we tried to redefine. For us, it was more about explorations. We take every competition as an exploration to redefine what we can do. So we typically redefine everything going subterranean in this manner and building everything pretty much underneath in a particular manner. So yeah, I mean, these are various kind of things that we are trying to do. Now, and I've really held you quite long. I'm supposed to wrap up soon, 9 minutes, right? Alright, so just to quickly go through. So one question we often ask ourselves is that how does one change culture? When we are designing all these kind of things, how do we change culture? Going back to technology. So for us, it's about creating various kind of education systems. So what we do, we have an educational entity called RATLab Education, which looks into independent workshops and modules, which we typically do all across India and various cities, and we've done that in various countries as well. Where we teach computational design and parametric design to various students of different backgrounds and different streams. So right from first year students to graduates. So we typically have like 18-year-olds to 45-year-olds as well, learning about computational design, integrating that into their workflows and modules, and kind of demonstrate that based on the kind of the workshop. And when we were doing that, we often used to question that, like how smart is our education, which is where we typically started to look into a program which we started, which was called Smart Labs. So yeah, this was the last batch, Smart Labs 1.0. This time we are doing the Smart Labs 2.0. It's a 6-month integrated program where we are integrating. So we try to redefine that education should not be limited only to a classroom. So we thought, why can't we integrate online education systems in place? So essentially we have a team of mentors from various kind of places around the globe who are experts in computational design, who teach our students about computational design through a 6-month syllabus that we have created. And it's going to be a diploma program very soon as well. So we had a batch of 20 students last time. We have 35 students who fly in every month, once a month over a weekend, when we have a studio in Chennai and Delhi alternatively. And then we have online sessions integrated, and then these are like glimpses from the batch 1.0 studio, where students kind of built in stuff, how they understood computation through step-by-step process, through various kind of series of workshops that we do. So every studio is like a workshop. How we break this down into various ways. Of course, the program has been well covered and talked about in various kind of magazines as well, which we try to give an exposure to various kind of students. And yeah, we've been having like various kind of discussions on architecture and design education and its future in India, which is after which Smart Labs was started. And yeah, I mean, these are like the various glimpses of works. I'll quickly keep brushing through how we get down into details of understanding complexity and breaking it down to actually build systems. This is all our student work, and how they kind of build these kind of systems in place, make models and stuff like that. And typically we have an exhibition at the end where they present their works, and yeah, various kind of forms, complexities, models. These are the final works of the students, which is more of a research, which they kind of break down the complexity into. And yeah, I mean, very soon we're going to be opening up admissions for Smart Labs 3.0. It's an admission system that we have in place. Just a few glimpses from the exhibition as well. So we built in like integrated systems. Again, so students get a space at the end where they kind of build an exhibition at the end to showcase all the students. The exhibition is usually typically open for 2 months in Chennai. And yeah, it's a really hands-on experience and exercise, which we end up doing. And again, as I mentioned, again we have a team of experts of how we kind of do things, and we have a schedule of the whole semester, which if any one of you are really interested in kind of enrolling for that, you can try to do that. Next time, if you have the zeal to get into the program, I would really urge you to do that, and I would really invite Asani to kind of collaborate on this in some way only possible, and take it forward as a next education medium for all sorts of things. So just to kind of on the end note, I wrote this article. I was a senior editor for Arc2O, which was a very popular architectural magazine at that time, online system. So So I wrote this article after I was a part of a workshop in London. It was called Create Your Own Tools First. So this is what I would urge you at the end, that you have to first create your tools or the techniques or the workflows or the methodologies. It need not have computers associated with it, but your own techniques as you progress. And you will always start after you graduate. Let me also tell you that. Don't think that after 5 years of education you are ready with your toolkits or methodologies. So we often get a lot of students, who would come out of 5 years of college and they would say, hey, we can design this, we can design that. But the reality is, architecture as a profession is called an architectural practice. We practice, we learn for an entire lifetime. This is how architecture should be treated. We should always look into things in a different way. And on a lighter note, I would give you this example. Anybody seen this movie, Limitless? Yeah, it's a very interesting Hollywood flick, and this is how I like to see technology as, where you create your own tools. It can actually help you open up your minds, and not advocating any sorts of NCT substance here, but yeah, this is it's a hypothetical way. But again, this is what I think tools can do. It can really allow you to open up your minds to do what you are otherwise not possible to do. And in terms of innovation in architecture, this is where we align. We still at the 2.5%, which is we have to still cross the hurdle and come to the next part. So I will leave you this with one small note, that this is what your comfort zone is, and this is where the magic happens, right? So I would urge all of you that you can't innovate within your comfort zone. So get out of your comfort zone for innovation. Any questions, comments, or anything, I'll be happy to answer. Or if you're shy of asking questions, this typically happens in a lot of public forums, we can have a chat later off the stage as well, whoever is interested. But if anyone has any open question or anything,
guests can ask any questions if they have. Anyone?
I think everybody is happy. So let's hit the floor.
We have one question.
I have one doubt regarding how we can we do this modeling with the Revit and Dynamo?
Can we
do with this kind of parametric modeling with the Revit and Dynamo?
So Revit and Dynamo, yes. I mean, I believe you have a sense of exposure to this. So you're an architecture student or
Architecture.
Okay. So yes. So there are various kind of softwares. There's a MicroStation which allows you generative design as well. There is typically the most common one right now is Grasshopper integrated with Rhino, which is an open source software. Dynamo allows you to do parametric design as well and integrate that with Revit. What I would say is every software will have its potentials and limitations. So as a designer and as an architect, you will have to understand that what is the best toolkit that you need to adapt to. And you will always have to integrate multiple platforms. It will never be one software giving you an output. So the answer to that is yes, Dynamo and Revit is definitely a tool. It has its limited capabilities. Grasshopper has its own limited capabilities. Python scripting has its own limited capabilities and its potentials as well. Sketching has its own limited capabilities and potentials as well. Model making has its own pros and cons again. So everything is like a toolkit, right? So don't look at softwares as a solution provider. That is what I can tell you. But yes, there is a parametric capability in that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Alright, thank you very much. It was lovely to be here.